You've got that flash of inspiration. Maybe it's a new feature for your app or a website redesign. You see the end result so clearly, but getting there from just an idea can be tricky. Well, today we're going to turn that spark into something tangible. Here's why having a solid plan up front is crucial. It helps you communicate the vision effectively with others, like designers and developers. It also ensures your ideas get translated accurately without any missteps or confusion later on. By the end of this video, you'll create a detailed spec using Clod, which will serve as a blueprint for turning that rough idea into reality. To start, open up your terminal and navigate to where you want to work on this project. Let's jump right in and make sure we're on the same page with Claude. All right, so by now, you've hopefully realized that turning your rough ideas into a polished spec with Claude can be incredibly powerful. But before we get started on the magic, let's make sure our environment is all set up. First things first, you need to have Claude Code and Clod.md installed. If you haven't already, head over to the official Anthropic website and download the latest version of each tool. Make sure they are in your path so that you can run them from anywhere in your terminal. Now, let's create a new project folder where we'll keep all our work organized. Open up your terminal and navigate to wherever you want this project to live. Type dear my_Claude_project. cd my_Claude_project. Next, initialize Claude Code with Clod.md by running these commands in sequence. Clod code inite markdown. This will set up a new directory called .Clod where all your Clod files will live. Inside, you'll find Clod.yaml, which is the configuration file for Claude Code. It's important that this file exists and is correctly configured. In fact, you can take a peek at what it looks like by just listing its contents. Clod.yaml. You should see something along these lines. YAML. Version 1. Markdown. Template default. If everything looks good, you're all set up and ready to go. Now that your environment is all tidy, we can start working on turning those rough ideas into a spec with Claude. All right, you have that initial spark, that rough idea you want to bring to life. But before we dive straight into the code, let's get it organized and fleshed out a bit. This is where Clod.md comes in. By refining our idea here, we ensure clarity and set ourselves up for a smoother coding process. First off, open your Clod.md file. It's usually located in your project root directory. If you don't have one, create it now. Let's jot down that initial spark you had. For example, let's say your idea is to build an interactive weather app for a city festival. Type this rough idea into Clod.md. Build an interactive web application for displaying real-time weather conditions at a city festival. Features: temperature, humidity, wind speed, and weather icons. User interface will be clean and easy to navigate with large readable fonts. Real-time data fetching from API. Designing responsive UI elements. This quick summary helps us outline the key features and challenges. Now, let's take a step further by breaking down these features into more detailed specs. Here's how. 1. Real-time data fetching. We need to fetch weather data from an external API like OpenWeatherMap. Add this under Initial Challenges. Real-time data fetching from API. Asterisk use OpenWeatherMap API for real-time updates. Asterisk set up API key in Claude Code settings. Asterisk implement error handling for network requests. 2. Designing responsive UI. Describe the basic layout and components. Designing responsive UI elements. Asterisk create a simple HTML template with Bootstrap or plain CSS. Asterisk include placeholders for temperature, humidity, wind speed, and weather icons. Asterisk ensure all elements are readable on both desktop and mobile screens. Now, let's turn this into more concrete steps. We can use Claude Code to generate boilerplate code for our API calls. 1. In your terminal, run Claude Code new to create a new project if you haven't already. 2. Use the following command to generate the weather data fetching function. Claude Code generate. Template equals data fetching / weather.tsx. Name equals fetch weather data. 3. Then, in your Clod.md file, Add a prompt for Clod code to generate the HTML template and basic UI components. Hashtag fetch weather data with API. Prompt. Generate an interactive web component using React or plain HTML for displaying temperature, humidity, wind speed, and weather icons. By refining your idea this way, you're setting clear paths for both yourself and Clod code. This ensures that when you start coding, the direction is already set, making the process smoother and more efficient. By now, you've got your rough idea refined. Great job. In this step, we'll turn those notes into a proper spec using Clod code. This will help us outline our project clearly and make sure everyone on the team is on the same page. First, let's set up the environment for working with Clod code. Open your terminal or command prompt and navigate to where you've been storing your project files. Bash cd path / to / project. Next, if you haven't already, make sure you have the latest version of Clod code installed. You can do this by running bash npm install g Clod code. Now, let's create a new spec file using Clod code. In your project directory, run bash Clod code new my_project_spec. This will generate a template spec file called my_project_spec.md in the specs folder of your project. Open this file with your preferred text editor. Mine happens to be VS Code. You'll see it has a basic structure already set up for you, including sections like overview, inputs, and outputs. Let's fill in these sections step by step. 1. Title and overview. Add a clear title at the top of the spec file, something like User Profile Sync Tool. Under that, write a brief overview explaining what the tool does. 2. Inputs. List all the data you'll need as input for your tool. For example, if it's syncing user profiles from an API, include fields like user_ID, email, and name. 3. Outputs. Define how the output should look. If you're writing to a database, describe the schema or format of the data being stored. 4. Flow. Describe the process step by step. How does your tool interact with the API? What happens if there's an error? This section is crucial for understanding the logic and ensuring everything works as expected. 5. Additional notes. Add any caveats or extra details that might be important. Once you've filled in these sections, save the file. Now, let's use Clod code to review our work. Bash Clod code lint my_project_spec.md. This command will check your spec for common errors and ensure it meets the project standards. If everything looks good, great. You now have a structured spec that clearly outlines what you're building. All right, now that we got our spec nailed down, let's get coding. The goal here is to leverage Clod's power to generate actual code snippets for you. This will help us turn those rough ideas into real, working pieces of software. 1. Open your project. Open your project in your favorite IDE or text editor. Make sure you have the necessary dependencies installed and everything is set up correctly. 2. Create a new file with Clod code. In your terminal or command line, create a new file for your code snippet. For example, bash touch_feature_function.py. 3. Prompt Clod to generate code. Open the Clod.md tab and type out your prompt. You want something clear and specific like this. I need a Python function that calculates compound interest given principal amount, rate, time period, and number of times interest applied per time period. 4. Get Clod's code suggestion. Once you send the prompt to Clod, wait for his response. He'll generate code based on your request. For example, Python, def compound_interest, principal, rate, time, periods_per_year. Amount equals principal 1 plus rate/periods_per_year. Periods_year asterisk time. Return round. Amount principal 2. Print compound_interest 1000 0.04512. 5. Refine the code. Take Clod's suggestion and refine it to fit your needs. Check for any edge cases or improvements you can make. For example, Python, def compound_interest, principal, rate, time, periods_year. Amount equals principal 1 plus rate/periods_year. Periods_year asterisk time. Return round. Amount principal 2. Hashtag test the function with some values. Print compound underscore interest 1000, 0.04512. 6. Test your code. Add a few test cases to ensure your function works as expected. Python. Def compound underscore interest, principal, rate, time, periods underscore. Amount equals principal, 1 plus, rate slash periods underscore year. Periods underscore year, asterisk time. Return round. Amount, principal, 2. Hashtag test the function with some values. Print compound underscore interest 1000, 0.04512. Print compound underscore interest 5000, 0.0674. Now that you've got a working function, let's move on to integrating it into your application and testing the broader functionality. Try running this code in your environment and see how it works. Great work so far. You've transformed an initial idea into a concrete plan and even coded it up. Now that we have a functioning implementation, let's turn our attention to refining the spec with Clod code. Running your spec through Clod code will help us catch any oversights or missed details. First, make sure you're in your project directory where your Clod.md file is located. If not, navigate there using bash cd/path/ to slash your /project/directory. Next, open the Clod.md file by running bash clod.md. This will open it in Visual Studio Code, or your preferred editor. Now, let's bring Claude into the mix. Open a terminal and run bash clod spec review. This command will load your Clod.md file and start a conversation with Claude about your spec. Pay attention to any suggestions or feedback he provides. Take notes on what you might want to add, refine, or remove. Once you've gone through the initial round of feedback, pick one feature from your implementation that's still feeling a bit tricky or could use some polish. Let's say we're focusing on the login functionality. You can ask Claude for more detailed feedback by running bash clod review, file equals auth login, feature equals login. This will zero in on the auth/login section of your spec and provide even deeper insights. By doing this, you'll not only improve the quality of your implementation, but also build a stronger, more robust workflow. Remember, the goal is to continuously refine both your spec and code until they're as good as they can be. So go ahead and run through these steps now. You got this.